Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Hi everyone, so today's episode we are talking about long and low and the effects on posture. How are you going today, Sophie?
Hi, Raquel. Going really well. This is going to be a great podcast because it has stimulated our conversation as well. So we have lots to think about and share.
Yeah, it's an area. I wrote a post on it on my Facebook page it was probably like nearly 10 years ago now, because I think it's an area that, even myself as a rider, I used to do it on my horse, but I never really understood like biomechanically what was happening. So I just thought that I needed to get my horse's head down and stretched out. But now I look back and I realize that probably wasn't that beneficial for my horse, like from a full biomechanics perspective. It helped him a little bit from sticking behind the vertical because that was his go-to. But again, I didn't even understand why he was doing that. So if I had have understood that, I could have been even more effective in what I was trying to create there. So yeah, like it's a pretty common exercise, and you were kind of saying that you've heard like many multiple perspectives.
Yeah, I think that the fact that I didn't have a huge amount of riding experience probably on a technical side, especially before coming and doing equine science, that I don't know, it just feels like a lot of the perspectives that I've heard over the last handful of years, I was lucky enough to have a perspective having done your subjects before at university, which had a big biomechanical focus, before I was ever really introduced to riding. And I think even still with that background, I was really in the balance and flicked back and forth about this particular type of exercise because I heard multiple perspectives that made sense to me at the time with the level of knowledge that I had and the level of experience that I had. And it changed back and forth as to whether I thought it was a good exercise. And now I think I have a stronger understanding of how there are so many exercises, this one included, where the way you do the exercise and the mobility and flexibility and strength your horse has before you come to the exercise and how the exercise is done justify whether or not it's useful for your horse. And yeah, that's what we're going into today.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, like any other rehab exercise, like it's a matter of perspective and in terms of like the quality that you're looking for within that exercise. And I guess historically it's been a little bit about the head and neck position. Um, and once that head and neck position is in a long and low position, they're doing the move. And yeah, over time I've come to see it quite differently, that yes, it is a part of where that head and neck is, but a lot of horses are just lowering the head and neck. And then what that does, they're not lifting at the base, they're not lifting through the thoracic sling. And so it actually just drops their balance forward. It creates more tension on the supraspinous ligament that goes to the hind end. The hind end actually ends up disengaging. They can't engage it then because the whole balance is forward. And then they're starting to like tip forward. And then they have to go quicker because they can't hold themselves up anymore. So they need to use the speed. So they often actually and they might get a bit longer in their front legs, but they don't generally get longer with their hind limbs, and they get quicker often with the hind limbs. And so it's really important that when you look at it, you don't just look at the head and neck, and you really think about the whole body being involved in this posture.
Definitely. And I think that sums up or it contributes to the fact that it is not a foundational exercise, really. I mean, it's not something that you say, okay, we're going to do long and low to start out our ability to have engagement or to have lengthening of the neck. And often there's like a camp of people who will say, oh, like long and low is be all and end all because you lengthen the neck and you lengthen the body, etc. And then there's sometimes a group of people who think that, that is not biomechanically the best for the horse, that it doesn't, there's no way that having the head, out and forward or low is actually contributing to good function through the thoracic space or engagement behind, or that it could be it's always a forced headset, which it can be. You can see that sometimes when, a horse has been trained to keep their head long and low, but you've seen examples where it's been a really quality movement for the horse.
Yeah, but like you said, it's usually advanced, like it's usually when the horse has that ability for function. So it's usually once they're aware of how to utilize their hind limb, they have the ability to lift through their core and their back, and the base of their neck. And being able to lift allows them to create lengthening. Um, and one of the things that kind of brought it home to me in terms of like what's happening there is in a dissection. And so in the dissections, I get people to put the horse into their head and neck into flexion. And sometimes we'll put it into roll curl, and they can really feel the stress on the nuchal ligament. But even in just a normal flexion, when you just do the head and neck into flexion, I get them to like feel the tension through the nuchal ligament as it passes over C2. And then I ask them to leave their hand there as I lift the horse through the sternum and the base of the neck. And then the tension comes off the nuchal ligament, but the head and neck actually goes more forward and more open. And then by opening up the thoracic spine and creating space between those spinous processes, you're going to create lift through the thoracic sling, but you're also going to get more ability to open up through the lumbar and then more space to bring that hind limb under. So then the hind limb can generate the power to hold the body up and out, and then you can actually get a long and low where the horse is lifting the base of the neck, lifting the sternum, stretching that head and neck forward while still maintaining length through the spine, opening through the spinous processes, and that engagement of the hind limb. And so for Jelly, he used to do long and low, but he used to just tip forward, go along on his front end and go quicker to maintain his balance. And his hind end just kind of did these little trailing steps. Recently, he had his gelding scar and iliopsoas muscles addressed rectally, and I was riding him and he gave me a long and low where I wasn't concerned he was going to trip, which he has done previously. He wasn't pulling on me. He wasn't going quicker. It was like he lifted me up and he was just moving and floating and suspended across the ground while having his head in a lengthened position. It felt like I could stop him and sit back at any moment and he'd just come back to me, and he felt so elastic in that moment and so light and so supportive. And that's taken a lot of function, one, and two, strength to actually get to that point and be able to hold it. And that's where it's not a foundational exercise, because a lot of horses don't have the core functional strength for it to be happening correctly.
Definitely. And when you describe that he is, now that he's moving well, when you describe the fact that he felt like he could only go falling forward when you had him on the balance of asking him to be trying to be telescopic out in front, how were you feeling behind? You know, did he have stability? Was he engaged? What did those moments feel like? What was the difference between his positive motion and not so great motion in terms of his balance?
I felt like so when he just used to lower his head before into a long and low position, I felt like that he could stumble or trip in front. I felt like his hind end was kind of pushing up a little bit, like it was pushing me forward to a degree. I didn't feel stable or supported. I actually kind of felt the opposite, I felt like I had to hold my position, if that makes sense. Like, as opposed to him holding and supporting me and me just coming along for the ride. Like when he does it well, it's like I'm just sitting there coming along for the ride, and it actually feels like the hind end is creating the power, not the front end creating the length.
Right.
So it's like I can feel the power coming from behind. I can feel the push still coming from behind. However, in the front, I've got this like lifted lengthening that's coming out in front of me, but it's stable. I'm not concerned. He's holding me, he's holding himself. I literally, in those moments, I'm just sitting there and enjoying the ride. It's like, it's amazing. I don't have to keep his head down. There is no contact with the reins. He's in that position. He's doing it himself. So
Right.
I'm not using my reins to put his head and neck in a position. And I'm just kind of hugging him with my legs. Like, I'm not even using my legs. Like, he's just like, I've got this. I can hold it.
Right. Yeah. Super balanced strength at
Yeah.
stretch.
Strength at stretch. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So when we think about like the potential pros of doing long and low. So, we've just talked about there like the balance, the stretch, the relaxation and the strengthening. But we've got to have the function of the core to allow for core engagement, and to counterbalance that tension of the supraspinous ligament. So supraspinous ligaments running along the top, the core allows for the opening of those spinous processes, and then counterbalances that. So, it can be a very beneficial exercise if the horse has the function, the balance, and is using their body appropriately to get it. Yeah,
So,
add anything there?
well, just that when you talk about core engagement and you're seeing the opening of the thoracic spaces, well, I mean, it's a combination. If you're getting core engagement, like in an iliopsoas podcast that will be out by the time this one's out, there's going to be an engagement of your all of your iliopsoas muscles. So the lumbosacral function is coming in there. These are potential
100%.
pros. You're going to
Yeah.
be opening and closing the joint, which is going to nourish that space and also increase just general hind limb function. When you have iliopsoas function improved, you've got an improvement in hip function, an improvement in stifle function underneath the lumbar. All of that space is going to be supported. So you've got propulsion. And then when you are able to bring those hind limb underneath the body well, and the leg is acting like a pillar of strength underneath because you have genuine engagement, that's when you're going to find that your hamstrings and your gluteals have appropriate and adequate engagement. And so you're going to have them developing. So that's a great pro when you're thinking about, is your aim to develop strength, particularly through the hindquarter. And then if you're getting at the same time lengthening of the back and the supraspinous ligament, you've got an expansion. So the ability to lengthen through the rib cage and the upper back, all those epaxial muscles, they allow for freedom of movement. So your ability to rock forward, not on the forehand, but be telescopic out front and then rock backwards. It's the ability to compress and then expand as well, both in front of and behind that cervicothoracic junction. I think Manolo Mendez, he has a saying, it's like shorten the body, it's short the body, long the neck. Like to be able to
Yeah, because
engage,
the body's like propelling.
yeah, and coming forward, and then the neck moving out in front of the rider. He had some really beautiful speeches actually about that, about telescopic neck motion in his in-hand videos.
Yeah, and I think he demonstrates long and low well as well. Like
Yeah,
the horse is not so low that they're tipping forward, which is really commonly occurs. So he's a good one to look at for a demonstration of long and low.
definitely. And what are some, let's say the exercise isn't being done well, long and low, or it's being overdone, what are some potential cons that you'll see with this exercise?
Yeah, so you see just there's a lot of stress on the forehand, and you'll see they're kind of heavier on the front legs. Like you can hear it, so if you can hear the horse kind of, you know, the front legs banging on the ground and you don't hear anything coming from behind, then they're not doing it correctly, because it should be more even kind of loading. You'll also see them put the head down but like flex. So they like down but they're behind the vertical. And in a true long and low, they're open and out and actually often not below the carpus a lot of the time. Like some horses can go below the carpus, but a lot of them aren't when they're doing this in a correct way, because otherwise the counterbalance like drops forward.
Yeah,
Um, I think also it can become quite tiring, like mentally and physically. The multifidi, which are the spinal stabilizers, are, really important for that function because they're kind of stabilizing the back as it opens. And so they tire super easily. Unless you've worked on a lot of postural stability exercises, they get tired. So, I look at my young horse, she's just starting to learn how to carry her body, but I've always focused on trying to help her have a neutral posture. Now she telescopes through her neck and she gives a version of long and low, like her head is, if she tipped her head any lower, she'd be running, but she gives a version of it where her body's involved in the whole thing. And I've never put anything on her head and neck to create her shape, except for feeding positions and other postural work that I've done. So, if when she does get tired, she goes quicker. I see the stress come into her back. So, like, I'll see her back muscles actually tighten, and I will see her get a downward swinging back. So, especially in the trot, you want the back to be quite stable and ultimately with a little upward lift. And what happens with her, because she doesn't have core strength yet, is that she's getting to the point where she can start to stabilize, but she doesn't have like a much upward swing, and she might stabilize for a circle properly. And then she might go a little bit quicker, change her head and neck position, or start downward swinging through her back. And that's hard to see or feel when you're on them, unless you've felt what it really feels like when they've got an upward swinging back, which sometimes just the saddle is enough to stop that. Sometimes just the way you ride is enough to stop that. But they do get quite fatigued when they're doing this properly, until they've really developed those stabilizing muscles, which are so vital in, like, if they're able to maintain this and hold it for a good length of time, they're going to be strong in every exercise. You know what I mean? Like they're going to be able to collect, they're going to have changeability within the gait. They're going to be able to engage. Yeah, like if you've got a horse that can do this well, they'll just be easy in everything else.
Definitely. Yeah. Um, so could you comment on how if the core isn't working, there can be a lot of tension on the supraspinous ligament?
Yeah, so the if the supraspinous ligament, so basically if the core's not working, and the core includes like iliopsoas, longus colli, like there's more involved in the core than just the core muscles, multifidi. If the core is not working, then the spine doesn't open. And so then when you ask for long and low, you get that pull on the supraspinous ligament and strain on it, which then tips that hind end up. And then the head is often lower, but there's no ability to like pick them up. Like they'll feel, when you go to pick them up, they'll feel like heavier in front. You won't be able to kind of change that trot easily. You won't be able to just shift your weight and they come back to you. You'll have to do something with the head and neck because then don't have the flow through the rest of their body. They've basically just got the head and neck in a position. So you'll have to pick it up because they're not using the rest of their body in that. And the supraspinous ligament is not in a lengthened state, it's in more of a contracted pulling state.
Right. Actually, you have a really good example that I know of, a horse who was recommended to do long and low for kissing spine or lordosis. I can't remember what you said, but that you couldn't use that straight up because he didn't have the changeability through his back. Could you explain what you had to do in order to get him to a place where this exercise could be effective?
Yeah, like it's often recommended for kissing spine rehab, to get them in long and low. And I guess historically, the thought of that is that it opens the spinous processes. However, if you don't have function within those spinous processes, so if there's still tension in the supraspinous ligament, tension in the infraspinous ligament, maybe a psoas that's not working, that's contracted. Perhaps the multifidi don't know how to switch on anymore. Perhaps the horse has never used their core and doesn't know how to work that. Then there is no opening of the spine. So it's actually just creating more stress in that area. So, it's still obviously better than having the head up in the air. That's going to create more closed impingement of the processes. So there's still a bit, it's better than that, but it's not going to be as effective as what it can be if the horse doesn't have the ability, doesn't know how to switch on appropriate muscles to actually open up those spinous processes and switch on the core and all of that. So in that situation, you need to get that function happening, which might be through other exercises first, like your carrot mobilizations, or getting a neutral posture and then expanding from the neutral posture. It might be teaching them how to be aware of their back legs first. You've got to break it right back to where is the dysfunction. Like it might be proprioception, gentle mobilizations, and then walking through a neutral posture with flexibility within that neutral posture, like might have some gentle lateral movements in there, or just awareness of that hind end and helping them find their balance and their stability in there before asking for them to utilize the muscles that they probably haven't used for a while because they got to kissing spine
Yeah.
somehow. So yeah, and it's like me, right? I talked to you about swimming and I have a sore back, and I will often notice when I bend down, my tummy pokes out, and my back hurts, right? So you could tell me that, well, one of the exercises I should do, could be like, what's it called? Basically where you do bend and like a deadlift, but without weights even. But if I stick my tummy out and do that exercise, it's actually creating strain. If I do that exercise properly with my core working, my multifidi working, I do it within my comfort, within my range, within my function, then, it improves me. And it's the same with, the swimming, the swimming switches on my core, it switches on my spinal stabilizer. So then the next day, my body is better in other exercises because I've switched them all on. But lots of times the horses are not switching on the correct muscles for the
Yeah.
exercise. And that can be quite difficult for people to realize is happening.
Yeah, definitely. And to see it and understand, I mean, all the things you just talked about, finding the source of dysfunction, actually getting on top of that problem, and then coming back,
Yeah.
retraining those postural muscles and then developing them over time without, over fatiguing. It can be a long-term journey. And another reason why this is not a foundational exercise. There are lots of things you want to have working before you can go into this.
Yeah, and I'd like you to do an exercise yourself so that you can get a better understanding of this. So if you imagine yourself, and if you're in a position not driving, where you can actually get down on the floor on all fours, put yourself in all fours, and then just drop your head and neck towards the ground, okay? Without doing anything else, just drop your head and neck towards the ground. And what you'll feel is if you imagine your hind end being the horse's hind end, you'll actually feel the hind end almost pop up, and you'll feel the pull into your back, depending on what issues you have going on, and maybe if you have core strength or no core strength. But if you just drop your head and neck down, you'll feel that pull forward. Then if you go back to all fours, and then you engage your abdominal muscles, so you think of bringing your belly button to your spine, lifting through your pubic bone, and then reach forward with your head and neck, you'll feel an opening through the base of your neck. And then as you kind of lower, you'll feel you can't lower to the ground as easily. But then you can feel how it brings that hind end underneath you, how it lifts and creates space in your spine, and then how your head and neck automatically telescopes down there. So really, I really, recommend that you try that yourself, because it gives you a much clearer understanding of what I'm talking about when you can feel it in your own body. And even the other thing I noticed when I did it is when I did it with the core engagement, I could breathe.
Yeah.
When I just dropped my head forward, it's like, I can't breathe. Like, and they're they're suspended without a clavicle even. So it compresses them up even more than us. Like, we have the clavicle to kind of help keep us open, and they have us on top of them as well. So
Definitely.
it really is going to restrict breathing when they're not doing that in a correct way.
And I suppose everything you mentioned about, what the brace that's created in the back part of the horse, like with Jelly, the tension, and if like you get pushed forward, it doesn't feel like you're sitting and being carried. That's going to transfer to the diaphragm as well with the brace, with the
100%.
abdominals. It's going to influence their breathing again.
Yeah, 100%. And we talked about like having postural stability and balance first. And I'd just like to give an example. So I'm working with a horse at the moment. He's 18 years old and he has severe lordosis, and he also had a twist in his spine where it feels like and I know he's reared a lot, and it feels like he's fallen and his hind limbs have gone one way, his front legs have gone the other way, and like his whole body had like a twist in it. And anyway, initially, it was just about like, if you put him into long and low, he would just bore forward, fall on you, or he'd become behavioral because he can't balance. And he was very behavioral. And so in the first few sessions, it was just about getting him to walk and halt in balance, and then try to find a little more balance in movement, like just keeping his spine aligned on a slight curve. Anyway, third session yesterday. And so now I said to her, because he's got function now, like yesterday I was like, oh, cool, like his spine, he's getting motion through his spine, he's getting movability through his neck, like he didn't have any of that. His whole spine was just like a stiff board. So you can't ask for anything when the spine is like that. And yesterday I'm like, oh, cool, he's got function, he stood for his treatment, he didn't need to move constantly, he wasn't going for food because he felt safer and more comfortable in his body, he was engaged in the treatment. But then I said to her, okay, let's just walk. And I think I showed him first. And then all she had to do was lift her lead rope. And this is where, for him, I don't want his head long and low right now. I want him in a neutral posture where he's lifted. And so for him, we actually bring his head up because he wants to take it down because his spinal stabilizers, his postural stability, his core function doesn't work. It has probably not worked for 18 years. And so, he wants to keep it down because that's the place of least resistance. But so we just bring him up into a neutral posture and then just let him walk forward. And for as long as he can. Then when he drops down, we just bring him up a little bit. We're not going to ask him to go back down until he's able to hold himself up. And so that is where, he is not the candidate to do long and low right now. But at the start, there was a lot of brace in his neck. So I did ask for relaxation in the neck. So before he'd walk, I didn't want him to lift and brace. So at the start, in the first few sessions, I asked for him to keep his neck in a soft, relaxed, not down necessarily, but just where it could be soft and relaxed for him so that he wasn't going into the walk straight away and bracing. So you do want relaxation, but then you want neutral balanced posture. Relaxation does not mean head low necessarily. Like, you can have a horse that's having their head in a neutral position and the head and neck is relaxed. If you do have a horse that's bracing high, well, yes, you're going to have to teach them how to relax that and lower them down a little bit. But that doesn't mean long and low. That just means and to the point of neutral relaxation. And I think that's really where people get caught up in, do this for all horses, do that for all horses. And it's like you've got to look at the horse in front of you and figure out where their best, most comfortable, neutral posture and balance is, and then work from there.
Yep. It's actually drives the point home that it's a really it's a complex and ongoing balance, an entire body. Like sometimes I even consider this in the context of the whole horse. You see people, they're just an amateur horse rider, and you're like, gosh, the level of knowledge and insight that goes into understanding and shaping the way a body moves to improve in all kinds of ways and states. Like, yeah, there's just a lot that goes into it. And we're talking about a handful of body parts that we've mentioned in this episode, but like you've got the whole body and the whole complexity of it together. There's a lot to consider. There's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. But then when you get it, it's easy, right? Like once
Yeah.
you get it, it's like, this is easy. But yeah, it's you've got to understand, you do need to understand what you're looking for and what you're feeling for. And that we want the horse to find that within themselves. We don't want to hold them there with our hands or have to push them all the time with our legs or put something on their head and neck and hold them in that position. Like that's not true self-carriage and balance. So we're really looking for that to all come together.
Yeah. So if you were doing long and low, how would you, at just a glance, what would be a little checklist of things to gauge the quality of that exercise in front of you?
I think that, yeah, you're looking for activity in the hind legs. You're looking for push under the hips and not out behind the hind. You're looking for a horse that's lifting in the base of the neck, not just dropping the head and neck forward. You're looking for a horse that has increased suspension and power rather than just going faster. So they actually look like they're taking bigger strides and their whole body's involved in that movement as opposed to just getting quicker. Yeah, and they're lifting behind the wither, and that kind of space is actually coming upwards, and it just gets to the point where it looks quite effortless. And like I said, they might only be able to maintain that for a couple of strides, then give them a break. Don't continue to do it and fatigue those postural muscles. So when you start out, keep it pretty short, asking for that amount of collection, and give them a good rest. Your rest might be actually stopping, it might be walking, it might be just doing something else for a minute, giving them a scratch. Those rest periods are integral for the nervous system to recognize good movement. So make sure that the rest is a part of that. Yeah. So what are some of your takeaway points from this?
Just that neutral posture first. So strength and variability, we're not just aiming for just head low postures, and having that neutral posture means that you have genuine integrity and mobility and function. We keep talking about function, like can everything engage and do what it needs to do before you decide that you're going to really ask for that engagement or collection. So yeah, building postural balance and stability. Also, a takeaway point is that this is a powerful exercise. It needs to be done mindfully. It's not something that you start out with, but it's more a goal to achieve along the way. That's a really good indicator that you've covered all your bases and developed to where you need to be before you're doing said exercise. What else can you think of?
Yeah, I think like the variation, like the ability for the body to vary in its motion is important. So, being able to lengthen,
Yeah.
but then being able to lift and engage and having that changeability within the posture and within the gait. And so horses that are becoming quite good at this, you'll be able to change their rhythm within the gait. Like you'll be able to have 4 gaits within one gait, so they've got a lot of variation within their available to them through their spine, and through their body. So yeah, I think it's just really opening your eyes when you next ask your horse to do it, videoing them, having a look at where their balance point is. Do they look like they're tipping forward? What's that hind end doing? Without a rider, it's really also beneficial because you can see the shape of their back, and then trying to find yourself some good examples to see, what it can look like. And I would say, yeah, Manolo Mendez, Mel Fleming. I think I've seen stuff on Karen Rolfe's page. Like they're probably 3 that come to mind where the horses are actively engaged behind, while doing long and low. So, get some role models. And yeah, that's really beneficial as well. Awesome. Well, I hope that's kind of created some food for thought. Thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler and Sophie Vandenberg in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so we can share more valuable insights.
Wonderful. And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.